Carla Gugino, welcome to An Actor Despairs. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. You know, I spoke about this with Kathleen Turner when she was on the podcast. And actor and actress, like I don't really like that differentiation because it pits us against each other because we're doing the whole craft. But you are one of the greatest actors in the world that I have ever seen. Like you've been such a hero of mine, and watching you work, like the decisions and the choices you make, they're so grounded and they're so moving. And like I've seen you come in certain shows and you come in like a hurricane and make such a beautiful presence, and then it's so felt, and that's such a hard thing to do, especially when like a show's already existing. And everything you've done in your movies, Watchmen, Sin City, like I love watching you work.
Thank you.
You're one of the greatest of all time. And then last night I got to see you on stage in Anatomy of Suicide at Atlantic Theater Company.
Well, I am so appreciative of that. And, anytime you can just say, when I was talking to Kathleen Turner, I think you should.
That wasn't like a name drop. No, but truly, you're one of the greatest. You're in my top 5. Like I love, you've really been such an inspiration watching you work. It's incredible, and everything you've done,
so
Entourage and Californication. You've done some really fun things.
I know, it's really, thank you. I'm so appreciative. It's something that I decided to do super young, and so it means a lot to me because it is kind of, aside from the people that I love, it's the love of my life, for sure.
So I usually like to start at the beginning. You grew up in Florida?
Yeah, so I was born in Sarasota, Florida.
Wow, what was that like?
That was I was there till I was very young when I moved from there the first time. I then moved and lived all up and down the California coast with my mom. We lived in a teepee in Big Sur.
Sounds like a dream.
I know. I was gonna say I should say this accurately because it's been said so many times that I should not mess up my own story, which is that I lived in a teepee in Paradise, California. I lived in a van in Big Sur, and also a house in Big Sur. But it was definitely 70s hippie. My mom came from a very conservative family, and so there was a moment where I said she was a hippie, and she was highly offended. And I said, "Mom, I thought that's a compliment to me." I mean, and then I realized, like, of course, coming from her generation, that was sort of a derogatory term on some level. But she really opened me up to a lot of things that, I bathed in the river, and in Paradise, she erected our teepee. We lived with these gold miners in this bus nearby.
Wow.
And it's actually funny because one of the podcasts that I listened to of yours was Morgan's.
Oh, Morgan Spector.
Yeah, and I realized that we have a very similar Northern California sort of bohemian period that I was unaware of.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, how did the arts thing happen? Was that kind of a natural progression of all this bohemian lifestyle?
I know, right? Probably somewhat, because I do think to be an actor, you really do have to have a nomadic spirit.
Yeah.
And be able to sort of have someone say to you, like, you're going to Thailand tomorrow and you're going to play a different human being, and pack your bags and let's go, and have that sound great as opposed to, just terrifying, which it would to so many people, I think. My Aunt Carol, her full name is Carol Merrill, and she was on a show called Let's Make a Deal with Monty Hall, which was sort of like the first sort of Vanna White. She was like this model and actress and spokeswoman, and she basically, when I was 13, I was living in La Jolla with my mom, and I got to. I was interested in fashion and photography, so I ended up getting into modeling more because of the fashion and photography aspect of it, because I'm short and I wouldn't necessarily...
But you're beautiful, obviously.
You're very kind.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting recruited by Elite Petite to come to New York when I was 13 for a month and go on all of these go-sees, as they were called then.
In the model apartment?
Exactly. We totally had a model apartment. We were supposed to have a chaperone. We didn't. We had a lot of rats.
So Zoolander movie being kind of...
Completely. Full on. And I was like this crunchy California kid, so I was like, I already had done like a candida cleanse and yoga. And like, I was like super like, I was like, what is happening in New York City?
Yeah, because they can be pretty uptight and prissy.
It was also, it was like really overwhelming at that time too, being sent on subways where I didn't know where I was going. And anyway, I ended up calling her that summer, and I said, I never want to quit anything, but I'm not sure this is for me. And she said, you're not quitting. Like, come stay with me for the summer. And there's this amazing acting class that I think you would really love with this man named Gene Bua, who, rest in peace, is no longer with us, but was an amazing acting teacher in LA. And I went and stayed with she and my uncle for a period of time. And I took this class, and it was a cold reading class. I'll never forget it, because I had studied a little bit in school, and I had done some plays in school, but I was a total academic. Like, my parents would have never thought that I would have gone into the arts. I drew in things, but I was a very like cerebral kid. And I went into this class, and I'll never forget, I did a scene. What's funny is I don't even remember what the scene was. Wow. I did this scene, and I remember thinking, oh my God, I am being asked to let go of control in a controlled environment. Yeah. And that to me was this incredibly exhilarating feeling. Yeah. And I just remember walking out of that door and calling my parents and saying, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And they actually took me seriously because I was such a serious kid. And
that's amazing.
Within about, I guess, maybe 6 months or a year, I was sort of booking, one-line roles on television
Co-star,
shows
guest
and stuff
star.
like that. Yeah.
Welcome to my life right now.
You know what? Yeah. One thing, as David Lynch says, one thing leads to another.
Yeah. And how was that? Like, were you in LA at this point then, or?
I was in Los Angeles, and I ended up staying in Los Angeles. Wow. From that moment on. My Carol actually sort of managed me for a period of time, and I got an agent, and it was really fortunate that way for me. It was kind of those things that are, as we know, they don't come easily. Yeah. But my first role was a guest star on Webster.
Wow.
And then
Didn't you do the Wonder Years?
I did the Wonder Years. That was like a step up for me, because I had done like Alf and Who's the Boss. No disrespect to those shows, but the Wonder Years I had a great role in. Yeah. And that was, a
great show.
Doogie Howser. A bunch of those things at that time.
That was amazing. Yeah. And then what was it like earning those kind of early credits? Do you feel like that was kind of your film school, so to speak, going on all those different sets? And
it was interesting, because I remained studying, and I always studied from the start. But I didn't end up having any kind of formal education for it, because I was looking into universities and I looked at various places that I ultimately got this sort of what was a really big gig for me at the time when I was 17, and chose to decide to, kind of learn through the work as opposed to going to school. And again, I think those are so personal, and it was the last thing I ever imagined for myself, because I'd always loved school, actually. Always got good grades and all that stuff. But I think when you move a lot, I think that you go one of two ways. I think either school becomes that constant that you really find to be secure and feel really good, or it becomes something you can never quite attach to in any of the places. So, you know what I mean? A lot of like nomadic people, I feel like you either end up sort of like being a really great student or a really shitty student, and it could go either way. Yeah. But that was definitely my kind of constant.
Acting kind of became your constant?
For sure, acting ended up I took it as seriously as I would have any school. Yeah. But yeah, I learned, I have learned on the job for sure over the years, and had the great fortune to work with incredible people that I could learn from too.
Well, I imagine, being as beautiful as you are, it can be both a blessing and a curse. And in the 90s, were you being positioned in certain roles that you didn't really want to do, or like, right now we live in a time of like strong female, powerful women, and like you paved that way, like
Thank you.
Everything you've done, it's like it's been so nuanced, and it's incredible to me, like.
Thank you. It's interesting. I do think it's super cool to see the shift. Yeah. And I feel like, in this big scheme of life, I'm relatively young still. And yet, even from when I was in my 20s to seeing people that I'm working with in my 20s now, women in particular, there's also an assurance that your voice wants to be heard. Yeah. That there are so many young women who are creating their own material, directing, writing, all of those things. And I think I felt that was something that maybe there wouldn't be even a place for on some level. So for sure, though, something that was that I feel the same way now as I felt when I was 13, and I really did at that moment. I saw Sophie's Choice and I saw Silkwood all in one summer, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. This woman, Meryl Streep, someone that nobody knows of, I know, but my own discovery. Yeah. That she played these two women that were very different than my life experience. I wouldn't have understood a woman who worked in a factory, or a woman who had to make the choice that Sophie had to make, and through the context that she had to make it. And yet I both of those movies finished, and I felt like I got a view into another world, and I understood another human being. And it became really important to me that that my job as an actor is to give empathy, and both to myself and to other people. It affords us the ability to see the world through different people's eyes.
Totally.
And I think that is the way that we can help in our small way to heal the world, And so, again, back to my hippie roots for sure. But so at the very beginning, what was interesting is that I never, even when I looked like an ingenue, I never sounded like an ingenue. I always had a deep voice, and I always had this kind of... So there was a key moment for me that I realized, I could become famous, or I could decide to pave what will probably be a longer path, and that is to be a transformational actor who hopefully you can believe in anything.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, a lot of years, it was a very confusing career to people, and people would go, wait a minute, you played the mom in Spy Kids, but the lesbian parole officer in Sin City.
Yeah.
Or, you did Athol Fugard's, Road to Mecca, but you're doing, whatever, you could Sucker Punch or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you could, and people were like, I don't understand. And thankfully, I think the one advantage of having done it now for more than 30 years is that it has been received as a body of work at this point.
Yeah.
So I do feel for sure there were things that people wanted me to do that I didn't want to do, and I didn't do. And then there were things, though, that were things that I didn't see myself doing, but because of some instinctual connection, I did, and turned out to be super fun, like The Son-in-Law, a totally silly movie that still people come up to me about. I ended up loving Pauly Shore. We had a great time on that movie.
Love Pauly.
It was like, and that was so that's the other thing that I think you realize with age, I guess, or just time, is that, like we were saying, like one thing leads to another. You never know what thing, like from that, I ended up having a director, Marty Callner, who called me to do this Bon Jovi music video called Always.
Wow.
That ended up being this huge video at the time. He had also directed Alicia Silverstone.
I know exactly
in the gas pumping Aerosmith video. And Liv Tyler.
Yes.
He had done those too. So there's very much like movies as videos at that time.
Yeah.
And so then that kind of came from that, and then that was a strange like thing that I just did kind of for fun, but then it ended up being like, this international audience of millions who sort of, associated me with that. And then, so it's just been, and again, these things keep sort of unfolding. So I think what I learned was go where the love is and never say never. Because anytime I say, I'm never going to do, I end up, I also said, I'm not interested in a sitcom. And then Spin City came my way.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, of course I want to work with Michael J. Fox. He is a genius in that medium. Why would I not want to go work with him? So I just realized these statements we make to try to sort of have some sort of control are illusory anyway. So
tactically, when you kind of get a certain project, do you try to kind of do something different then after next?
It seems to be the way it happens. I don't try to, but that does seem like right now, you've been able to see Anatomy of a Suicide.
Yes, at Atlantic Theater Company till March 15.
Yes. Yes, till the 15th. That's something that does take a toll, and it's worth it. It's such a beautiful play.
Yeah.
But it's a play that Alice Birch, our writer, is, unapologetically it's challenging for the audience and for the actors, but in a way that so many people have walked out just insanely moved. And then I've gotten numerous emails 3 days later with people going, I couldn't really speak after, but this is what I want to say about my experience.
Wow.
And so that's been really gratifying. But I certainly can say, I am going to do Streetcar, which is not a comedy next, but I do feel definitely the need for, if somebody came and said,
when are you doing that?
At Williamstown.
No way.
With Audra McDonald.
This summer?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm coming.
And Bobby Cannavale. And,
my God.
Robert O'Hara is directing us. Yeah.
What the hell?
I know.
Why is that not on Broadway?
I know. Well, you never know. But yeah, we're doing it
Stella?
at Williamstown. Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
Stella.
I know. I thought I might have passed my Stella prime.
No.
So I feel very glad.
Oh man, that's amazing.
So that's really exciting. But yes, though that is not it, I definitely do feel like if somebody said like, hey, do you want to come and do something really funny for a week or two? I'd be like, yes.
Totally.
Well,
yeah, so speaking of fun, like, you did like Spy Kids. I imagine that was something, when that was pitched to you, kids movies, that was kind of the first one that was like really such a franchise success. How did that end up coming your way? Like, talk to me about that, because that's Robert Rodriguez,
it
right?
is.
Yeah,
who I've now, I did 4 movies with, and I adore. It's funny because that is actually a really crazy story, which was I was doing the last season. I was just on for the last season of a medical show called Chicago Hope.
yeah.
And I was playing a neurosurgeon, and I had gotten to go watch a brain surgery, which was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Again, actors, we are so fortunate when those kind of opportunities emerge. Yeah. But I got this call saying a casting director named Mary Vernew, wonderful casting director. She also cast for Quentin Tarantino, and she's great. She was casting the movie, and I was told, Robert wants to meet you for the role of the mother and wife, and Antonio Banderas is set. The kids are set. Someone was going to do it, but they got pregnant, and so they had to drop out. And we've been shooting for 2 weeks, and and you were on none of the lists because you're 10 years too young for the role. I was 27. And I was 27 when I did Spy Kids.
Wow.
And I know, isn't that crazy? Like, I'm the right age now. And so basically, I thought, well, Antonio and I had done a movie together with Sarah Jessica Parker and Mia Farrow and a bunch of amazing people.
Yeah.
Paul Mazursky, that David Frankel had directed called Miami Rhapsody.
Yeah,
Gil
yeah.
Bellows. And so I thought, God, did Antonio suggest me? Maybe Antonio suggested me. I don't know. But it was all very time sensitive. And I had just paid this big amount of money to take this very special, intensive Spanish course that was non-refundable. Wow. And I really wanted to learn Spanish. And I had thought,
did you?
No. No, I'm so mad.
My last name's Perez, and I don't even know it.
I mean, it's just, So anyway, so basically, I said, well, I just have to finish this 1-week course, and then I would love to meet him. And they said, well, you unfortunately you can't. Like you actually have to meet him in New York this weekend because they're in the middle of shooting. And if you get it, you would need to go. This is a Friday. You'd need to go on Monday and start shooting. So I had to let go of the class, which was like I said, I had been saving up for this class. But I thought, well, Robert Rodriguez, maybe I'll learn Spanish. You know? So on set in Antonio. So I fly to New York and I'm on a red eye, and I look, and there's this woman, and she's next to me, and she says, "Are you Carla Gugino?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, and obviously I wasn't very known at that time, so it was unusual for somebody to know my name and say it right. And I said, "Yes," and she said, "You're going to for Spy Kids, right?" And I said, "Yes, who are you?" And she said, "I'm the costume designer. I'm coming to fit you." At which point I was like, maybe I'm closer to this job than I think. So Robert and I end up.
Was that the first time you met?
That was the first time we'd ever met.
Yeah.
And his wife at the time, who was his producer, Elizabeth Avion, who went on to produce many movies with him after that as well. I get there, and she's in the hotel room, and she said, "We don't fly together on the same plane ever because we have 4 kids, and we like to never be on the same plane at the same time." And she said, so his plane got delayed, but here, sit in this hotel room, read the new draft of the script. He'll be here by the time you finish. I finished the script. Robert comes in, and he basically tells me that, again, I was on none of the lists. That's why this came about so last minute.
Yeah.
But that he was in his trailer, and one of the kids, the kid who played my son, Junie, his twin brother, fraternal twin, not identical, and I had done a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie together with Mae Whitman, and Laura Dern played my sister in it.
Wow.
We had done this called Season for Miracles. It was a Christmas movie. And I did it mostly just to do something for the kids in my family, because I'd done all this stuff that like the young people in my family couldn't see. And so I was like, oh, good, this is like a tame Christmas movie, whatever. And we had a lovely time on it. But so he gets a knock on his door, Robert Rodriguez on his trailer, and Daryl, Sabara, who played Junie, says, I think I know who should be the mom. And he's like, what? He said, here, and he hands him Season for Miracles. And like a DVD, probably even, I'm thinking VCR at the time. And Robert has a little bit of ADD, so he's like, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched some of it, and I thought she's really good, but she seems, she is young for this. And then I saw your Q&A, your EPK at the end. Wow. And your answers were so mature, and so that I thought, I think I could believe her as a mom. And totally. I basically feel like I'm looking for a mom for my kids. So he shows me a sizzle reel that's really cool of about 10 minutes of what they'd already been filming. And he said, I said, so at this point, I'm just like, I love this guy, and I just want to find him. I just want to find the woman for this role if it's not me, because maybe I'm too young, but like we've got to find him a great mom for his kids in this movie. So I looked at him and I said, very honestly, I was like, so who do you think you want to play the mom? And he goes, I'm thinking you. What do you think? And I was like, I mean, I think I'm young for it. I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, here, my mom had 10 kids by the time she was like almost your age. If we do our job right, no one will question it. And no one did. And that was, we were off to the races, and that was that.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
And did they have I mean, I guess you can't plan for that to be a franchise, right? That
they didn't have a plan. Yeah, it was just one of those movies that took off. They let us make it on our own in Austin, Texas. People rarely came to visit the set. He just created this beautiful movie that was like, to this day, people still try to kind of capture that spirit, and I don't think anyone else has in that way.
It was really magic.
Yeah.
And then that obviously led to Sin City.
And then that led to Sin City, yeah.
What was that like? I mean, that film is like,
it's crazy.
It's timeless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so ahead of its time.
That was a fascinating experience because, first of all, I'm scantily clad in that movie, and Lucille, the character, doesn't give a shit. She's a lesbian parole officer, and Mickey Rourke is there in front of her, and she's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it was the entire crew from Spy Kids, so I felt like I was like basically getting naked in front of my family. I was like, hi guys, nice to see you again. But all joking aside, what was fascinating about that was, we had decided, and that part was shot first. They sort of strayed from this notion as the filming continued on that movie. But initially, it was truly frame per frame the graphic novel. Wow. So our section, Marv and Lucille, and that whole section was Frank Miller was there with us every day, and we had basically 3 monitors, and Robert was so ahead of his time that way. So this was still all like slightly analog-ish.
Yeah.
But we had a monitor just with the actual frame of the graphic novel.
Yeah.
And then we had a monitor with a green screen version that we were in. And then we had that monitor turned black and white. So it was truly working from the outside in.
Wow.
It was not your typical process or my typical process of sort of like, where does character emerge from the inside and then how does behavior come from that? It was very much like, she's leaning this way. She's on the right elbow. So we were technically had to be beholden to very, kind of like constructs that ended up being really interesting and really. I love anything that I can learn from. That's something new.
Stylistically, it was so ahead of its time.
And parameters are just good.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do believe that, and I think that's why. I think it's why it's hard. Some people have done it successfully, but very few. It's so hard to be brilliant as an actor and also direct yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, I think you can be give a very strong performance, but they are two different things because one is so immersive and the other one needs to have an eye on everything at all times.
Totally.
So whenever I see a movie that somebody has starred in and directed and their performance is amazing, I find it almost inconceivable.
Yeah.
But so in that way, I was happy to have those kind of parameters just because it was such a weird experiment anyway, that movie. But I had a great time.
Yeah. I mean, and the end result is incredible. Your character's so amazing.
Yeah,
and
she's cool.
That was like right before Mickey started the comeback of
For
the
sure.
wrestler.
For sure.
How was it working with him? Was that
amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was amazing to work with. He was really committed to that character.
Yeah.
And I also think, with Mickey, because he has, he boxed for so long and he has had things that have happened to his face.
Yeah.
He looks different than he used to. I think that's sort of something, he was such a incredibly good looking young man.
Totally.
And I think that everything sort of changed for him exactly in that way. And Marv as a character allowed him to be kind of like, grotesque on some level as a character, and yet also still very virile and kind of like and genuine hearted, which he is. And so I felt like it gave him this kind of just as an observer, it gave him this kind of freedom that was really beautiful to see.
Well, and speaking of tactical shifts, then now we live in an era of television bubble. Apple, Facebook, everyone's got it. But back in the day, it was like just HBO and then just the ABC.
For sure.
And then you did Entourage, which at that time is like, I would say it was bigger than Game of Thrones ever was.
I know.
mean, that show was the biggest show ever.
That show was massive.
What was it like switching from Sin City to like something like that? Was that fun for you? Was that a good time?
So fun. That was a crazy thing because, again, I don't know. I didn't think I was going to come in with the one thing leads to another David Lynch theme, but I realized it is so true because that one I was doing Night at the Museum it's like all of my things are based on when I was doing certain jobs, but I was doing Night at the Museum in Vancouver, and I had also come to do Scott Frank's first movie with Joe Gordon-Levitt and Jeff Daniels and Matthew Good in Winnipeg for just a couple days on that. I'm I'm just spacing out on the name of it. I'll remember in a second. And so I had flown back to Vancouver from Winnipeg. I was filming Night at the Museum, and I got this call saying they would love for you to play this role of Manda on Entourage. There's only one script written, but Doug Ellen would love to speak with you, the creator of the show. Yeah. If you read one script and he can tell you where he thinks it's going. And the only caveat is you can do the whole show, most of the show when you finish doing this movie, but we need you to come down like next week for this Lakers game because we had to have floor house seats.
Oh, because there's that one scene.
Yeah, it's a scene where I've taken over, like I'm trying to steal.
And you bump into Piven or whatever.
Correct, exactly. So, and I think it's funny. I think some of us had like Joel Silver's seats. I can't remember who donated their seats for us, but so anyway. So I talked to Doug. I love the script. Immediately, I was like, she's fucking awesome. I have to play this character
great.
Immediately. And
I want her to be my agent.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I'm like, yes, that is a good agent. And I modeled her after, she's her own entity, but I did take influence from two amazing female agents that I know in the business. And so anyway, I get there. I go down and it was the most distracted I've ever been. Because, if you've done theater, it's hard to distract you because, people might get up and walk out. People might cough. The phone might ring. So I find that actors who do theater are much less distractible than film actors oftentimes, just because in a film set, it's so quiet that if a pen drops, somebody can be distracted by it, So anyway, it's hard to distract me. But I was literally watching... may he rest in peace, Kobe. I was like watching this unbelievable game while trying to remember my lines, but it's a real game that's happening. So it was like
there's no pause.
It was just sensory overload on every level. But I did shoot that scene, and we had a great time, and then went on to do a few seasons of that show. Yeah. And from that, Zack Snyder and Debbie Snyder were big fans, and that's where Watchmen came.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How was that? Because that's another stylistic kind of in that Sin City vein. Do you like working on the? Because I feel like so much of those films are in post. And that requires such immense acting and patience.
For sure.
How do you work technically on that without giving away your secrets?
Yeah, no. I would say that question you're asking is even more apt for something like San Andreas.
Yeah.
Because San Andreas, the entire section. Once Dwayne and I get on the boat, other than one day, was all green screen.
Wow.
So the entire city was built in post. So we were literally with a rain machine, a wind machine, a boat on a, sort of, what are they called even, where you're like something that's moving the boat.
Oh, the oscillating machine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that took a lot of imagination. For sure, where, you're looking at a tennis ball falling, but it's actually the building that your daughter is in that's crumbling down. So those are the things that I really do give so much credit to all of the, Marvel actors and everything like that, because it is, obviously these are wonderful actors who happen to be doing Marvel movies at the moment, but those things do require wonderful actors because otherwise, it just looks sort of like nothing's happening because nothing is on the actual stage. But Watchmen, it's interesting because I would say that Zach and Debbie create an environment that's very unusual, which is and I said this to them the first time I started working with them, they make the biggest small movies in the sense that they feel like you're on a set that's like $1 million movie in terms of the vibe, but yet they're making a $60 million or $100 million movie.
Totally.
Like it's this very tight-knit, familial, intimate thing that doesn't feel like there's a corporate element to it at all. And so that was just much more, I'm a sucker for, period pieces, and so I just loved what he happened to be saying politically was really interesting to me, and also I loved the span that Sally Jupiter got to go, and I loved all that stuff in the 20s and 30s, and it was just so much fun.
So cool. Yeah. What did you think of the new one on HBO?
I haven't gotten to see it. I hear it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's come out since I have been literally I am a person who will wait. I never see anything right when they come out, and then I just watch them all at once. So I really do want to see it. I've heard it's wonderful.
So one of the reoccurring themes I talk about on this podcast, and I really mean this, like you're so incredible, is like finding your voice. As you were working on all these projects, do you feel like you always kind of found your voice early on and you knew, who you were and what you wanted to do? Or do you feel like that's something you found as you went through the work?
I feel like it's definitely something I found as I've gone through the work, for sure. Though I will say, interestingly enough, when I watch some older performances, like from when I was very young, some performances that were longer ago, I realized that I was who I am, but I just didn't know it quite yet in a weird way. But there's no doubt that I think we're so fortunate as actors to get to have to confront the demons in ourselves, and also the strength that we might be able to do, to have, to harness. It's just a profession that makes you constantly challenge yourself, and therefore grow. And I think that along the way, I would say that the biggest defining sort of thing that shifted for me is that I believe I started just by nature kind of wanting to get the approval from the outside and wanting to, there's no doubt, of course, for all of us that it feels
Validation.
better. Yeah, it feels better to have somebody say nice things than not.
Yeah.
But I think now what I realize is what feeds me in the long term is gratifying work. Yeah. And, I hope that I'll be able to be doing that work until the day I die, when they're pulling me off the stage. But so in that way, I think I am more interested in seeing the world from the inside out. And that makes me a better, braver artist.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, having all this momentum and a television career that's successful, a film career that's successful, edit that roll. I'm curious, did you always have an imperative to do theater as well? Was there always I need to get back to the stage? Was there a yearning for that?
What's interesting, there has been for the last, 15 years. But before that, no, all my dreams were built on film and television because that was sort of what I was raised with. Yeah. I started in Los Angeles.
And
that
I'm
was
sure your agents
my opportunities.
Didn't want you 2 months in New York.
Exactly. And it was sort of, but I did have the support ultimately of agents and of wanting me to do theater as well, because I did want to sort of break my way into it. But Michael Mayer, who directed Spring Awakening.
Yeah, I just had Glenn Fleshler on. He was talking about
exactly.
Yeah.
He's extraordinary. Yeah. He's done so many things besides that. But he was directing Arthur Miller's After the Fall. Yeah. And Arthur was still alive at the time, shortly before he passed away. And Peter Krause played Quentin, the lead character in that.
From 6 Feet Under, right? Yeah, I love him. He's great.
He's so good. Yeah. And Jessica Hecht. I mean, there was just so many amazing actors in that play. Candy Buckley. Anyway, so many great people. But that I auditioned from Los Angeles for that play, and I fought really hard for it, and I ended up playing the character of Maggie, who's based on Marilyn. Yeah. And I somehow was able to. There were so many seasoned Broadway actresses that wanted to play that role, and I
that was your first Broadway
and
credit?
That was my first Broadway credit, and I got it, and I got here, and it was at the American Airlines Theater, and I.
It was Roundabout.
It was Roundabout. Yeah. And the second I stepped onto the stage, I felt at home. And it was the most bizarre juxtaposition because I knew how to act, obviously.
Of course.
But what I didn't know anything about what it was to do a play in New York. I didn't know which nights were better nights, quote unquote. I didn't know what a Thursday night audience was like. I didn't know about a matinee. I didn't know how much I needed to project for the back row under the mezz to hear me. I didn't know, there were so many things. And I was given a great gift by a friend who said, just take advantage of being a baby in that aspect of it, of being new to it all. And it worked really well for also my character because I was playing a character, Marilyn, who had this kind of just nature that was just hatched, Yeah. And so it was a revelatory experience. The Broadway community really embraced me, which was amazing. And it was the beginning of what would be the opportunity to do some incredible plays. Yeah. And for sure, I mean, the last play before this, before Anatomy that I had done was A Kid Like Jake by Daniel Pearl at LCT3 at Lincoln Center, and that was 6 years ago. Wow. So for the last 3 years, I've been really chomping at the bit to do a play, and I just haven't gotten to. So I'm so excited that I get to do 2 in a row.
So let's talk about Anatomy of a Series. So how did that come your way?
I will say briefly, just because it's such a good quote, it's such a crazy quote. When Arthur Miller saw our first run of that play, he said something so crazy. He was like, we were so nervous, and he said, I forgot a lot of that play. He said, it's pretty good. And then he said, I realized I didn't know why I was writing it at the time. Yeah. He said, I thought I was writing it about people, which I was, but I was also writing about a change of times from all for one and one for all to every man for himself, and we've never gone back.
Jesus.
I know, and we were all just like, whoa.
Wow.
But anyway, it was extraordinary to have him there.
Was it difficult for you doing the 8 shows a week? Like, did that, like, just tenacity wise, like, was that a huge transition for you, all of a sudden having to, like, say the same thing over and over again and having audience reacting different every time?
Yeah, it was definitely a learning curve, more really, frankly, vocally for me.
Yeah.
Because I do have, like, I tend to be more, I think if you're more of a nasal person, your voice just sustains better.
Got it.
And now I know how to do it. But at the time, it was, I just didn't know how much voice rest I needed or didn't need. So there was all that kind of stuff that I was figuring out. But I've never chosen an easy play. I've never chosen a light play for some reason. It's just happened that way. So all of the shows I've done have eventually been, I get pretty tired by the end.
I'm sure.
But
especially also, this one.
Yeah, but they also do feed you, and that's the
I'm glad you're smiling today.
Is that they give you the energy. I know, and back at it tonight.
Yeah.
But so Anatomy of a Suicide. Alice Birch, I think, has written, and I don't use this term lightly or cavalierly. I think she's written a brilliant script.
Yeah.
As because you've seen it, it's technically almost like a piece of music.
Yeah.
It's scored, and I mean down to when a character has a pause, there's a period on that line.
Yeah.
So that line, and she'll also capitalize certain words that she wants emphasis on, but it isn't. But she allows. There's a lot of freedom within that. But speaking of parameters, they're really interesting parameters to play within. It's also an exploration of women, birth, death, suicide, what we inherit, what we take with us, what we want to shed, what we're able to shed. Are we able to shed what comes in our genetic line? All of those questions.
Trauma.
Yeah, trauma. Yeah. And I really love that she asks a lot of questions. She probes deeply, and it doesn't give a lot of answers. So I think you do leave there seeing these powerful, interesting, complex characters. I think playing Carol was so interesting to me because so often I've played extremely verbal roles, more more like the role of Anna might be written.
Yeah.
And in this case, what I was really struck with, especially when we started staging it, was how Carol is so solitary so much of the time. Yeah. She's just alone a lot, and nobody understands her and nobody listens to her. So throughout the entire play, she's saying, "I'm frightened." She's saying, "No." She's saying all these things and no one's listening. And finally, by the end of her journey, she's saying, "I'm fine." And maybe someone finally hears it, but it's too late. I don't know, So so I also was really interested in that generational shift where then Anna has a different kind of manifestation of her madness or her depression or whatever you might want to call it. And then you come full circle to Bonnie, who has a world, today's world, which is more supportive and communicative about these things. And that maybe she might have a shot at beginning a new life and not carrying that with her. But Liliana Blaine Cruz is a really exceptional director, and what's really cool about Liliana too is not only is she super talented and visually I think has done some beautiful things with this, but she also is an innate warmth and passion for life. And Alice's words and her tone is this sort of deep, icy connection to the world. She's not icy as a person at all, but I find that this play and a lot of her words have this sort of, and maybe because she's British also, there's this kind of, the temperature is actually cold of it. And Liliana's temperature is very warm, and the combination of those two blend really well, I think.
Wow. And was that a difficult play to rehearse? Because so many of the cues, there's so many different things happening at the same time. Was there a really long rehearsal period for that?
It was. We needed a long rehearsal period. We did not have a long rehearsal period. We had 3.5 weeks, and it was.
Oh my God.
And I thought perhaps it was because I'm not a spring chick anymore, and I was like, maybe all the youngins are gonna know this perfectly. But it basically was the hardest thing for any of us to ever learn.
Yeah.
And Jo, who you just saw, who plays Jo in the play also, and she also plays the woman who sits down with me at the park bench and sort of comes on her. She's great. She was like, I had to throw away every single thing I know about how to learn lines because basically what would happen is as soon as you would drop in and be present in your scene, you'd forget to take your cue from the other side of the stage on their fourth "I'm sorry," and then, and then
so true.
and then you would be then you go, okay, so I have to just listen to that, and you'd be not present here. And finally, the two were able to coexist. But I've never, ever had an experience where I felt my brain was sore like your bicep can be sore.
Yeah.
I felt like the combination of the deep emotional work and the mathematical, musical work of the rhythms that needed to be played in terms of
That's another Miller quote right there.
I know, it's true. But it was just... It was just crazy. And I also had a very unusual circumstance, which I hope to never repeat, but I'm glad we pulled it off. The only way I could do the play was I had to go finish filming something that I was already obligated to in Vancouver.
Okay.
And I had to leave in the middle of tech and miss 3 days of tech to go film large speeches in a Northern English accent on something else, which needs to be remain nameless at the moment.
Okay.
Because, yes.
All right.
But and then come back, have missed 3 days of tech, and be in front of an audience for our first dress rehearsal, literally having never run the play on stage before.
Are you serious?
It was, you can relate to this. It was a literal actor's nightmare. Like, it was an actual actor's nightmare.
I would need like 4 Xanax.
I mean, it was so crazy. I can't even tell you. And so my solution was to get through it was, aside from just thinking that maybe for the first time in my entire career, I would have to just run away. I didn't do it, but I really wanted to. I just looked at my dresser and I said, I need you to tell me which scene I'm entering, which scene I'm exiting, which door I'm entering, and which door I'm exiting. Like I need to know what scene I'm doing and which doors I'm entering and exiting from, basically.
Yeah.
I just stayed super present and just did one scene at a time. But it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And for the first week and a half of that run, even though people didn't seem to notice, thankfully, we were in a position that you'd never want to be in, which is you're literally backstage still running scenes together and going through your lines, because it was that thing where you ended up having to know everybody else's lines.
Of course.
And before we did, it would be if one person messed up, we wouldn't be able to save each other.
Yeah.
Now we can. So now if something happens where one line gets inverted, everyone else can know what comes next and adapt. So it's been an incredible example of an ensemble.
Yeah.
And it's been an incredible example of collaboration. And, you are only as strong as your weakest link. And the amazing thing is we have the strongest links. We have such incredible
the cast is
actors.
incredible.
It's just, and all of us were like of the same tribe. Like, there's not a diva in the bunch. Everybody just wanted to come in and serve this piece and be able to share this story and strive for excellence. So.
Yeah. And I'm not giving anything away here because the title's Anatomy of a Suicide. What's it like every night having the audience, given the heaviness of that topic? Do you feel that?
For sure.
Yeah.
No, you definitely feel it. I mean, Alice Birch has, there's some comedy, as you saw. So there's some moments where you get to laugh and just take a breath as an audience member. But absolutely, no, this is a play that you really don't know how people need to process this stuff very differently.
Yeah.
And despite the title, which I think she kept very consciously so that people kind of knew what they were in for, I think still some people don't know quite what they're in for. So there are people who are openly weeping. There are people who get up and leave.
Wow. You've had walkouts.
Yeah.
Wow.
There are people who, not many, and interestingly enough, the 2 times it happened, there might have been one, and one of them might have been last night.
I think I did hear that. Yeah.
It's at the end of the scene, which I won't give too much away, but
I know exactly what you're.
Yeah. Where I'm saying the same word over and over,
Yeah.
and Anna has a speech about her life.
Yeah.
I think if you. That stuff is so intense that if you didn't come for that night at the theater and you're not quite able to handle it, I think that's the time you get up and leave for understandable reasons. To me, I've never been interested in middle of the road anyway. And for me, I think one of the things theater can do, I'm also not interested in theater that just provokes for the sake of that. And what I do love is this play isn't a naturalistic examination of suicide. This is a highly stylized, really exquisite piece that goes very deep into some existential questions, you know? And I think the thing is, if the biggest existential question is suicide, is how do we crack life?
Yeah.
I am really intrigued in exploring. Life is really tricky, and we all have these moments where we don't know how to crack life. And that feels like a very universal thing to me, to greater or lesser degrees. And so, I want to allow the audience to have the process that they need to have as individuals. You know, I've had people who, like I said, just said, I couldn't even talk to you afterwards. I had to leave and process it. Other people who waited till I got downstairs to say hi and literally burst into tears. Yeah. You know, other people, it's just, you know, it's really, everyone has such a different response.
No, yeah. I mean, I've spoke about on this podcast, I told you I'm sober. And so I've dealt with some suicidal stuff. And it was really accurate, just the way we experience trauma and the way the brain deals with it and how you're coping and how other people are understanding and not understanding. And I thought it was just so brilliant. And it was such a wonderful piece. And you're amazing, you know?
Thank you.
And obviously my viewers will be bummed if I don't ask, but like, you've obviously had a huge hit of The Haunting of Hill House. Yeah. What was that like, you know, being in one of these Netflix massive shows now?
That was incredible. Well, I love Mike Flanagan so much, who created that. And we had done Gerald's Game together, which is a Stephen King adaptation that Bruce Greenwood and I did with Mike. And so when Mike asked me about Haunting, I was so excited to do that. And I just love him as a filmmaker. He is a true auteur. Yeah. And I was so excited to do the show, whether people dug it or not.
Yeah, because you don't know with Netflix, because they bat so much, and then when they hit a home run, they hit it. And that one was like...
And that show also is, again, not for the faint of heart.
Totally.
You know?
That's kind of why.
And if people wanted a typical horror show, they didn't get it.
Well, and it also really kind of deals with trauma, you
big
know?
Time.
Yeah.
Grief and trauma. So that was, I would, you know... I hope to be collaborating with him for very many years to come. But I love doing that. And then, of course, doing Jet was an incredible experience. And I don't know if you've gotten to see Jet yet.
No, I haven't.
Jet is a show that I co-produced also and star in. And Sebastian Gutierrez wrote and directed, who's my partner and who is an exquisite writer and director. And
what network is that?
Cinemax. So you can watch it now through Hulu or Amazon Prime. It is one of my favorite characters I have ever gotten to play. Wow. Giancarlo Esposito is in it, and he's amazing. Jodie Turner-Smith is in it. She's amazing. Chris Bacchus, Heike Jensen is an incredible group of people. Michael Aronov, who's an amazing theater actor and film actor, but he is. I just have seen so much of his work on the stage, and he's just one of my favorite actors on the stage. But he is also equally amazing in film. But that is a show that we're actually in the process of sort of trying to find a home for its second season, because it got these incredible reviews. Yeah. People really responded to it, and in the world that we are in today, AT&T bought HBO and all its subsidiaries, and Cinemax now no longer exists. So literally, our network was swallowed.
Because they have the Nick and Quarry and all those shows.
I know, and none of them will ever. They're making no more original content.
I wonder why that happened.
So that's what the deal is. And so basically, there are a bunch of fans and a bunch of people who are really advocating for a second season, and we hope to find a place for it. But
please make it happen.
But it's but I think you will really dig that show. Actually,
I'm gonna check it out.
It's I can say it took us 4 years to make it with the people to make it right, and we made exactly the show we wanted to make.
How did it come your way?
Sebastian wrote it and gave it to me and said, "Do you want to do this?" And it was literally one of the best things I've ever read. And then we took a number of years they were offered us to make it in certain ways with certain, like as a pilot, we wanted to shoot it as one long movie. There was a lot of things. And so we kept saying no, which is always scary because, you always want to say yes when someone says they'll give you money to make something. And we waited, and then HBO, Cinemax came back to us, and we made it all. We shot it all, like we cross-boarded it like a movie.
In the way you wanted to do it.
9-hour movie, and we had an incredible time shooting. We shot it in Toronto, and So
Was that your first time wearing the producer hat?
That was my first time. I have produced some things, but that was my first time producing from the ground up, in the sense of finding the casting director and helping cast all the people and being
literally
really
from pre-production
active on, exactly through exactly.
Wow. Yeah. And then I'm curious, because now we live in such a time, we kind of spoke about it briefly, like, there's Marvel movies, and then there's like indies, right? And that middle American film doesn't exist anymore. So tactically, as an actress now that you've worked in all different, what interests you,
I know, it's interesting because we were talking about that, like, just the fact that the other countries are still making really interesting movies that don't have to be these tiny sort of niche things, or they don't have to be the
intellectual
huge,
property.
Yeah, that you have to, it has to be on your water bottle or whatever. But I do think limited series are kind of in a weird way where that's gone, where the auteur-driven work can come. Because, again, back to Jet, since Sebastian wrote it and directed it, and Johnny Klimek, we got this incredible composer who composes all of Babylon Berlin's music and Deadwood, and he's incredible. And but we were so Sebastian really wore the producer hat on that, and it was a thing that would be the equivalent of, say, what you would say as a Quentin Tarantino movie, or the Coen brothers, or people who their stamp is on it from beginning to end, and yet people still get to see it. So I think in a strange way, that's where it's almost like an extended version of a movie, the movies we used to get. But I love to do it all. This is the answer. I don't have, I don't, as soon as I do one medium, I always want to jump to the next. So
I totally understand that. Well, final few questions here. What's inspiring you right now? Like, is there anything that you've seen recently in music, theater, television?
I know. It's
media.
It's been interesting because I have been. It's so funny. I just said this yesterday. I just said, God, I can't wait to start having an influx of other material coming into me other than the play, because this play has required so much focus. So I do feel right now like I haven't gotten to see a lot of theater. I haven't gotten to, there's so
I guess
many,
you're
like,
doing
I just have been so myopic. We had a huge amount of dramaturgical information that Alice gave us for this play. And so I sort of submerged myself into that until I was at capacity in terms of it was just too, I just couldn't.
I imagine it must take you a while every night to get to that place.
It's definitely, now it's sort of more of a, my body is in it, but it's definitely, has required a lot of attention for sure. But I'm always inspired by other people's work. And I think that's the thing that galvanizes me more and more are just other artists. And anytime I can go see a beautiful art exhibit or another person's play, or read a novel that is exciting to me. I have a stack of all of these things on my desk. But right now it's weird. I would be able to answer that question so easily. But
you're immersed in this work, and that's
I
great.
really am, but only for another week and a half. So if we talk next time, I will definitely
I got to have you back and talk more.
For sure.
For those actors that were where you were in that, the Wonder Years co-star, guest star, they're struggling, any words of advice, wisdom for those out there fighting the fight?
Well, you know what? I think that there is no sort of like, I never want to give a pat answer, because these things are so complicated, and we have chosen a really, really tough profession.
Sorry, I know that's a really loaded question.
No, and all I can say is that I think, being true to yourself and your own voice, the most personal is the most universal, and that it's much less about trying to fit into the constraints of what you think people might want of you, and try to just create your own stuff that people can see, even if it is a 5-minute home movie that you make at home, and you put a Vimeo link together or whatever. It's like whatever we can do to create and have people be able to see our work. Now more than ever, those kind of things can actually
open the gates.
They really, really can. And and try to find, which I feel that I never did enough of, hobbies that really actually, other creative endeavors that really do feed you in those times when the desert feels longer than it should. Because all the people, my friends who play guitar and make music, and my friends who collage, and, I feel like because I started so young and I started supporting myself so young, I felt like I had to 100% focus on acting. And I wish I had sort of diversified a little, just to be able to have other outlets when I'm not working.
Play piano or something.
Exactly. And I think that those things are, now I realize, even more important than I thought they were. So I do feel like, I guess that's what I would say, is that if you can find other things that light your fire, that will always feed your work no matter what, you know?
So beautiful. And then I know you spoke about, obviously, Streetcar. What else is next? We know there's a Northern British accent movie coming out that can't be titled. But what else do we have to look forward to see?
I was in a movie called Gunpowder Milkshake that we shot in Berlin. This wonderful director, Navot Papushadu, which is quite a name. It was amazing, and it was with Karen Gillan, Lena Headey, Angela Bassett, Michelle Yeoh, and myself, and Paul Giamatti. And it's a great group of actors, but it's this female badass movie. It's so cool. And STX just bought it for a worldwide release, which is a big deal because, as you know, so often you do the movies and maybe no one will get to see them if somebody doesn't buy them.
Yeah.
So that just happened. So that'll come out. And then I have a bunch of other stuff that I'm working on getting set up, and so I hope soon to have a more specific answer to
Amazing.
that.
Do you have a production company?
And maybe Jet Season 2.
Jet Season 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't have an official production company, but I do have a lot of sort of irons in the fire, and I probably should think about that at some point, officializing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Carla.
Likewise,
and I'm
so much.
such a big fan of yours, and thank you for inspiring me and all the work you do. And I can't wait to see Streetcar.
Well, and thank you for doing this. What a great place that people can come and we can have a real conversation where you're not just sort of sound bites.
Yeah, and thank you for doing it. It means so much, giving back, and it keeps us all inspired. The
sure
ones that we're fighting the fight.
I agree. No, I think the thing is you have to continue to reinvent yourself, and pretty much if you're lucky, it's like you're starting all over every time anyhow on some level. So I think I don't know if patience is a virtue, but it's definitely a necessity.
Absolutely.
And I think it's actually one of the key ones in this business is just hold out and keep focused on what you love to do, and there's more magic in that than you think.
It's so beautiful. Well, it's such a pleasure having you on.
Likewise.
I can talk to you for hours.
Likewise.
And you have to come
So
back
good
soon sometime.
Yes.
All right.
Thank
So much
you.
love, Carla.
Thank you so much. That was
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
So fun. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Did you have fun? I hope that was
Totally.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, having a real conversation just makes it so much more enjoyable.
Yeah,
What made you decide to do this?
Honestly,